class, graciously sponsored by my wife and I, Le'ilui Nishmat, her beloved father, Salvador Eskenazi, Menachem Ben Belina Alav Shalom, and also Le'ilui Nishmat, her beloved grandmother, Belina Bat Sultana Aleyha Shalom. Iratzon, that to the words of Torah and Berachot, their neshamot have an aliyah in Gan Eden. Amen. I saw something very interesting connected to yesterday's parasha. We know that Yaakov Avinu, after the meeting with the sons of Yosef, Ephraim and Menashe, Yaakov Avinu gives a very known and very famous beracha known as Hamalach Agoel Oti Mikol Ra, the angel that spared me or saved me from all evil. Yevarech et hane'arim, may he bless the children. Ve'ikare ba'em shemi v'shem avotai, and may they be called with the name of my father and myself. Ve'idgu larov bekerev ha'aretz, and they should be fruitful like the fish on the earth. And our rabbis ask, why why did Yaakov Avinu, when he blesses his children or grandchildren, utilizes the fish department? Why don't you bless him to be strong like a lion, like we say in the Mishnah in the morning prayers? Why don't you say to be strong like an ox, the way Yosef Sadiq was compared to? But from all of the creations, Yaakov Avinu selected the fish. So I saw in a book that unfortunately did not quote the source. It's called Shulchan Shabbat. Maybe that's the source, the table of Shabbat. Beautiful words of Torah for the Shabbat table. And it says something fascinating. There is one advantage that the fish has over any other creature of consumption. And he explains the following. You can have a sheep, lamb, veal, deer, cow, ox. All these are kosher animals. But the fact that by nature they are kasher doesn't mean that you're going to be able to eat it. Why not? Because maybe sometimes the animal may become not kasher. The animal can become not kasher during the shechita, or the animal can be determined not kasher after the proper shechita was done, but the lungs or the reot were found to have a halachic problem, and therefore they are no longer kosher, even though that the nature of the animal is kosher. The only exception in the animal kingdom that this problem does not happen is the fish. The fish is kasher or not kasher? Is it a kosher fish that has fins and scales, or is not a kosher fish? I must stop the class for 30 seconds. Alex, you're a good follower. Please tell the maintenance department that we have more people standing than sitting. No. Get some volunteers to help you. Quickly, bring more chairs. Especially it's my breakfast, right? I want people to be comfortable. Anyways, but thank you. Irrelevant who sponsors, being comfortable is imperative when you eat and you want to learn Torah simultaneously. And that's what the Shulchan Shabbat teaches us. The fish has one message for each and every one of us: consistency. The fish is kasher 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It doesn't change by the weather. It doesn't change by the season. Even if you find a physical problems inside of the fish, they may not be eaten from a health perspective. But as far as concerned truth, the minimum requirement of kashrut for a fish is to have the fins and the scale. And that's what the Shulchan Shabbat writes, the concept of Yaakov Avinu telling his children and grandchildren consistency in Avodat Hashem is a requirement. And I think that we all can relate because we all have our ups and downs in our godly spirit. For 2, 3 weeks we may be going great, and the next day we take a step back, and then we go forward and we take a step back. Yaakov Avinu teaches us it's no better formula in Avodat Hashem and in Torah learning to have hatmada, to have the consistency like the fish has, and that's the reason why Yaakov Avinu bless his children to have the characteristics of the fish. With all that being said, today we begin a new chapter in Jewish history. Today we begin with Sefer Shemot. Sefer Shemot, as we know, describes the history of Am Israel in Egypt. For the past few weeks, we discussed the life of Yosef in Egypt, how in Perashah, Vaigash, Yaakov Avinu comes down to Egypt from Eretz Israel. Perashah Vayhi connects to the last 17 years of the life of Yaakov, and now we come to the life of the Jewish people in Egypt. So right away, for those that were here yesterday in Sauda Shelishit, we had a wonderful speaker that came from Mexico, Rabbi Zubi Katan, and he gave a beautiful message on the beginning of today's parasha that I like to utilize that Devar Torah as the springboard for the class of today, because we have a lot of topics to cover. Not because I was not here for the past week, but actually because we're entering into a new period in the Perashiot, as I will discuss this in a few moments. So the Perashah tells us right away that the Jewish community in Egypt was established by 70 people, starting with Yaakov and the Imahot without Rachel. Rachel already passed away in Eretz Israel, and the Shevatim and their children, including Yosef, his wife, and Ephraim and Menachem. And the Pasuk tells us very clearly there were 70, but Yosef Hayam B'Misraim. And Yosef was in Egypt. And Rashi asks a very interesting question. The Torah does not repeat words, meaning to say, the Torah, if there is a word in the Torah, if there is a statement in the Torah, if there is an extra letter or a letter that is not in the Pasuk, must be a message. Sometimes the message is visible and is obvious, and sometimes the message is hidden. Today's message is hidden. Rashi has a question. Why does the Pasuk must tell me that there were 70 Jewish people in Egypt, and Yosef was also in Egypt? Wasn't Yosef, his wife, and 2 children included in the Heshbon of the 70? If you look in the Perashah, when the Torah gives us the lineup, you include Yosef, his wife, and his children. Why the Pasuk must tell me that Yosef was in Egypt? Where was Yosef? In Cuba? Where was Yosef? Obviously was in Egypt. Rashi answers, and it says, Leodiacha sidkato shel Yosef, hu Yosef haro'eh tzon aviv, hu Yosef שהיה במצרים ונעשה מלך בעומד בצדקו. Rashi says the Torah wants to highlight one more time the greatness of Yosef HaSaddiq. It says Yosef HaSaddiq, let's do the calculation. Yosef HaSaddiq lived 110 years. Yosef HaSaddiq was sold at the age of 17. So how many years ago did he leave his home? Do the calculation. 93 years. 93 years Yosef was outside of Eretz Israel. The last 80 of the 93 years, Yosef was the viceroy of Egypt. Yosef was double the time of kingdom compared to David HaMelech. in yesterday's Haftarah. Ve'amelech David Zaken, I believe, right? Vayikrevu Yemei David Lamut, right? So we're talking about how many years was David Amelech king? 40 years. Yosef in Eretz Israel, surrounded by Jewish people. Yosef was the viceroy in Egypt for 80 years, double the time. 80 years. Yani most of the life, Yosef was the viceroy. So comes Rashi and he teaches us that the Torah wants to highlight the holiness of Yosef, the same essence of Yosef when he was a shepherd, the same essence of Yosef that was in Egypt and eventually becomes viceroy. Viceroy ve'omer besitko. He did not change. He remained as holy as in the beginning, which is a beautiful lesson because many times when certain changes affect the life of the person, people change. Sometimes people change for different reasons. Sometimes could be money. Maybe a person that came from humble beginnings or basic beginnings and suddenly becomes very successful. Some people change a lot, but some people don't change at all. Like the story being told, the Ben Ish Hai brings an interesting story about a fellow that had a ring. He sent to the jewelry store, he ordered a special ring. In this ring, he inscribed three words, Gamze Ya'avor. And somebody asked him, what's the meaning of these words? He says, very simple. When I feel down because I'm getting hit from all sides, I look at the ring and I say, Gamze Ya'avor. This shall also pass. What does that mean? That even darkness has an expiration date. Where do we learn it from? Two sources, two easy ones. Number one, Bereshit, Vahi Erev, Vahi Boker. After sunset comes sunrise. Yes, the sun sets, but the next morning the sun rises. Eob says three words, Ketz Sam Lahoshech. Darkness has an expiration date. Remember, if there is darkness, there is always a tomorrow. And these are very powerful words to lift us up when, Hasve Shalom, we may feel that Mazal and good things are not on our side. Statement number two, says the Ben Ish Hai, when this fellow was looking at his life and was celebrating or savoring the success that he had and the wealth that he had, he will also look at the ring and say, Gamze Ya'avor. In other words, count your blessings. The way we heard yesterday, a very successful man who in his office in New York City, in Manhattan, a very successful man, that anyone who sat with him in a business deal, Baruch Hashem, was showered with beracha. But in this desk, there was something very peculiar that no one dared to ask. Until one day, somebody asked him the following question. I see your desk, very elegant. I'm sure that many great deals were made on this table. But let me ask you a question. Why do you keep a plate with ashes, with earth? Why do you keep a plate with earth? Is this earth from Har HaZetim? Is this earth from the Kotel? Is this earth from Meron, the Vimir Ba'alanes? It says, no, this is earth from my garden outside of my office. So why do you have to have a plate of dirt? It says to remind me that we all going to go there. And I'm nothing. And all my success and all my blessing was from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is apropos to say this about Yosef HaSaddik. Even in yesterday's Torah portion, when Yosef HaSaddik speaks once again to his brothers, we see the love and the caring and the tremendous level of emunah Imagine yourself as a dick for a moment, looking at his brothers and looking at every moment of misery that he experienced in Egypt. What do you think? That in the Egyptian jail they give you kosher food like in American jails? You think that they gave you kosher food? In American jails, they give you kosher food. And some jails, unfortunately, have a minyan 3 times a day. And some jails have Torah classes on a regular basis. And I don't even know if they have Daf Yomi, but definitely a lot of things in the American jail system are geared to accommodate the religious needs of the inmates. Now, don't ask me what a religious Jew is doing in jail. I don't want to know. I don't want to ask. Better not to talk, better not to ask. But let me ask you a question. Do you think that Yosef in Egypt had what a Jewish inmate has in America in the 21st century? Guaranteed not. So if Yosef would have failed spiritually and fallen, perhaps we could have even justified it. We could have said, Hazit, Nebach, Misken, didn't have the support system, didn't have the Aleph Institute to make sure that he has kosher food and tefillin and Torah classes every day. But the Rashi says, Jewish people, the secret of Yosef's success was his own natural holiness and godliness. As Rabbi David Asher writes in this week's, yesterday's Perashah, in the Living Emunah, on the Perashah, a title called The Pinnacle of Emunah. And this was Yosef. Yosef had every right and every power in his hands to act against his brothers. But he says, my brothers are only the agents of the sender. If I have a complaint, if I have an issue, speak to the customer department. Who is customer service? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's easier said than done. But with this being said, there is something else that's happening effective today. And is the change from Sefer Bereshit to Sefer Shemot, which you don't need me to come here to tell you this, because if you went to the shul yesterday, in Mincha, already we read Perashat Shemot. But whenever Perashat Shemot comes across, we come across a very deep topic known as the topic of Shovavim. The topic of Shovavim is not a simple topic. Today I'm going to give only the introduction because I like to concentrate a bit on the Gemara. But I'm going to come to the Gemara in a few moments. But Shovavim is a period between Perashiot, Shemot, through Mishpatim, hence the word Shovavim. If you take the first letter of each Perashah, Shemot, Va'era, Bo, Beshalach, Itro, Mishpatim, Rashi Tevot, Shovavim. Shovavim is from Lashon Teshuvah. That's the meaning of Shuv, to return. So these weeks are given amnesty to a peculiar sin that affects Jewish life. Topic number one is obviously personal holiness of a man. How a man is careful with their Berit Milah, which by default it brings reinforcement on the topic of Taharat HaMishpacha, the topic of family purity in the relationship between husband and wife. So what I like to do today is first discuss a bit of the Gemara, because the Gemara is very beautiful and very practical, something related to the topic of prayers that we do every day. And Be'ezat Hashem, we have 6 weeks together to be able to discuss different messages of Shovavim. And soon we'll explain why specifically these 6 weeks were given as amnesty for sins of our youthful years. Maybe a person today is much more careful than 20 years ago, but we learn different tactics and different things that we can do to remedy a very serious sin that maybe society and the world of medicine doesn't care and actually encourage the person to sin without thinking. But from a Torah perspective, it is a very serious sin, and we'll discuss moments go by. Going back to the Gemara of today, the Gemara of today discusses God inquiring for someone who did not come to the synagogue to pray. The Gemara begins, Amar Rabin Barabada, Amar Rabbi Ishaq, Kol haragil labo lebet hakneset, a person that is accustomed to come to the synagogue on a regular basis, velo ba yom echad, and one day he did not come. Hakadosh Baruch Hu mash'il bo. God asked, what happened to Yosef? Why he didn't come to the synagogue, etc. So the Gemara brings a very interesting pasuk from Yeshaya Hanavi. And this pasuk, in a way, questions why the person did not come to check in with Hashem. In other words, it seems on the pasuk that when a person comes to pray, especially at the synagogue, there is a special benefit, which is something that we discussed maybe 2 weeks ago. But bottom line, Yeshaya Hanavi says, why you were not at the synagogue? Was there a justified reason why you were not at the synagogue? Or there was no justification why you were not coming to the synagogue? So, and the Gemara will go even further. Amar Rabbi Yohanan, בשעה שהקדוש ברוך הוא בא בבית הכנסת ולא מסע בעשה. There is a topic in the topics of synagogue calls the time of prayers. The time of prayers. Baruch Hashem, in our synagogue, we aim to be very cautious with that. That means that when the prayer needs to start, rain or shine, the prayer needs to start. Why? Because there is such a concept, Shemirat Hazemanim, the watching of the time. Why? Because he also shows that you are caring about the effort that everyone else made. Obviously, some synagogues may be more lax on it, but here, Baruch Hashem, we start when we need to start. Maybe a few seconds delay, but obviously, unless there is a special guest, like the chief rabbi of Israel, the handful of times that we delay the prayer and we announce it to the kahal for the kavod of the chief rabbi, we're going to wait a few minutes, especially a day that he was coming straight from the airport to pray into the synagogue. And there was some traffic, but Baruch Hashem, it wasn't more than a few minutes delay. And the most beautiful part of it, and I was watching, that no one left. Everybody stayed, and I don't recall hearing any comment from the grapevine, which is a beautiful zechut. Why? Because at the end of the day, there is such a thing known as kavod haTorah, the honor to the Hachamim. But the most beautiful part of it is that everyone stayed. That everyone stayed. And the person who couldn't stay, because at a medical appointment that was waiting for 3 months, he says, Rabbi, what should I do? I told him, go to your appointment. And then come to say hello to the rabbi in the afternoon. And Baruch Hashem, he did exactly as I'm telling you, and Baruch Hashem, he got good results. Why? Because there is a moment that a person needs to understand. There is a pasuk in the book of Tehillim that says, Ed la'asot Hashem, heferu toratecha. There is a moment to close the books in order to serve Hashem. So therefore the Gemara writes, what happens if a synagogue announces Minyan will start, let's say, at 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock comes, but there is no Minyan. There are 6 people, 7 people. You need to start picking up the phone to make sure that people come, or you call the night before, getting commitments from people. The Gemara uses a very strong language, and it says, "Madua bati ben ish karati ve'en oneh." The pasuk in Yeshaya says, "How do you think that God feels?" It says, "Madua bati," I came, be'en ish, and there is no minyan. Karati, I call you out, be'en oneh, and no one answered my call. So what the Gemara is trying to tell us, the Gemara is trying to say is that the zechut of being from the 10 people that make the minyan, it blocks godliness of activating anger. Scary that something so easy can activate such a reaction. But on the other hand, being proactive can draw a smile in God's face. Unbelievable zechut. Comes the Gemara and it says, "Kol hakobea makom litfilato." The Gemara goes further and talks about the importance of praying on the same place, besides praying in the same synagogue on a regular basis. And I'm not talking about when a person is traveling, or a person travels in the season. In the winter, they come to us. In the summer, go to Deal. In between, go to Brooklyn. But you should always have a particular synagogue that you prayed at. Don't do shul hopping unless you're traveling again. And even in the synagogue that you prayed at, try to always have a particular area, a particular space where you pray. This is called kebi'ud makom litfilato. You fix a location where to pray. Concerning the synagogues, let's be honest. Whenever we pray in a different synagogue, by default, we get distracted. It could be a different tradition. It could be a different decor. It could be that you see a lot of familiar faces, or you don't know anybody, or maybe they're praying in Ashkenaz or in Sephardic and you don't understand, and it's not your same nusach. So there is a certain level of distraction when a person goes from place to place, from place to place. There is no, how do they say before in the word of Atmada, continuity. There is no continuity. Or if you hop from place to place, from place to place in your same synagogue, the Gemara seems to imply that when a person prays in that same location, you develop a certain level of connection and affinity with the location that you are praying at. I say this from a personal perspective. I know depends in which minyan I pray, where I pray. And if some reason somebody sat in my place or stand in my place, it happens. I don't know, people sometimes don't read English. Maybe we should put it in English, Spanish, Hebrew, and Portuguese and Arabic. But I don't care, it's fine. But I have to pray elsewhere. I feel the difference in the prayer. You agree? Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you. And what is the benefit of having a fixed place? I will say the following, Kahal Kadosh, that as long as we are 6 feet within the area that we always pray, and I must clarify that this prayer the Gemara is referring to is the Amidah. As long as they are within 6 feet, is considered in our perimeter zone. Not yet. But I will tell you one thing. Since we're starting soon the renovation of the main sanctuary, the prices today are better than after. And you can still have a good seat at the same rate. Once the new project starts, it will have to be a CPI increase adjusted. Please, and soon we'll have a map. You can pick your seat. Otherwise, will be computer generated. We're going to have extra legroom seats, aisle seats, middle seats, different rates. But at this moment, At this moment, I'm not selling anything, but I'm planting the seed in your brain. L'chaim. So the Gemara writes, כל הקובע מקום לתפילתו, אלוהי אברהם בעזרו. Whoever establishes a fixed location for prayers, the God of Abraham, it comes to your help. Well, now, what does that mean, the God of Abraham? Short answer. Abraham Avinu was the first one to establish the Shaharit prayers. So by default, Abraham gets the merit. That's the reason why in the Amidah we say, Elokei Abraham, Elokei Ishak, Elokei Yaakov. What do we say? Magen Abraham. Why do we say Magen Abraham? But why Abraham? In the beginning, you said Abraham, Ishak, and Yaakov. Why do you say Magen Abraham? Short answer, because if Abraham Avinu is not protected, Ishak and Yaakov are not part of history. So because Abraham was the initiator of the idea of prayer, a person has like an extra zechut, let's call it. Ukeshemet, and when this person passes away, Omrim lo, they say to him, I'anav, I'hatzid, mitalmidav shel Abraham. Wow, we lost such a humble person. We lost such a pious person. We lost a student of Abraham Avinu. Why did we lose a student of Abraham Avinu, says the Gemara? Oh, because he found a place where to pray. And I look around the room, and I know where most of you sit. You sit depends. Weekday you have one seat, and Shabbat with the big boys at the back row south, close to him, right? You see how I know your GPS tracker? I'm not going to ask you if you own two seats, but we'll take care of you. Don't worry, we'll give you a special. And if you if you buy one for your wife, you get double benefits. Later on, we'll describe everything. Let's continue. Where do we learn that Abraham Avinu established the prayers? By Yashkem Abraham Baboker, very famous pasuk. One more, very quickly. When we come to the synagogue, there is a concept that the person should come to the synagogue walking faster. When we leave the synagogue walking slower. Why? Because we don't want to show, oh, I'm running away from the synagogue. There is an Hebrew expression that says, Ketinok haboreach mi bet sefer, like a student that runs away from school. How challenging is for parents to wake up their child to go to school in the morning? Big time, big time. You agree? Nice. And once you ring the bell in the afternoon in school, Hazako Baruch. He's too honest. Beautiful. He runs from school to come to the synagogue's program. After high school, he runs to make it on time to the teens program upstairs. Hazako Baruch. It says, when it comes to a mitzvah, run. Where do we learn it from? A pasuk. The pasuk that says, in Hosea nirdefa lada'at et Hashem. Let us run in order to get to know God. Meaning to say, I have a mitzvah to do, I'm running to do it. I don't procrastinate. The Gemara writes, Amal Rav Zera, look at the interesting concept. Ki hava meresh, Rav Zera was very honest. He saw that yeshiva students were running on Shabbat, were running on the street on Shabbat. For what purpose? The Gemara says, to listen to the rabbi's class on Shabbat. Sounds good, right? You run to listen to the rabbi's class? Beautiful. But says Rav Zera, Amina kamehalian Rabbanan Shabbata. It says, hold on a minute. The Gemara says that the way you walk on Shabbat needs to be different than the way we walk in the weekday. So how come that they allow themselves to run on Shabbat? On Shabbat, you should walk slowly. It says, once I became aware, the statement of Rabbi Tanhum, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi that says, Le'olam Yerusalam ledavar halacha afilu b'Shabbat. The Gemara writes that when it comes to Torah learning in Shabbat, you're allowed to run to listen to the Torah class. Anna name rahidna. So Rav Zera says, I'm also going to run because by running towards a Torah class, I'm showing Hashem my love to the Torah. By running out of the synagogue, I may show, oh, thank God, it's over. Comes the Gemara and it says, Amar Rabbi Zera. Now, people come to a Torah class. Baruch Hashem, our synagogue has Torah classes every day. But obviously, Shabbat, Baruch Hashem, we have classes throughout the building, especially throughout Shabbat afternoon and some in the morning. Now, a person comes to a Torah class. There is a reward, a sechar that a person receives. And the Gemara discusses, the reward is for what? For coming to the class? For sitting in the class? Learning something from the class? How do I summarize the reward? Comes the Gemara and it says, Ikra de Pirka, the reward of coming to the synagogue to listen to the shiur of the rabbi, who ala ritzah, by making the effort, you already get sechar. Sometimes the person or the audience may not really walk out with a lesson or truly understand the speaker. Sometimes the person comes in because the neshama understands, or sometimes the person is sitting down and doesn't understand the language and still they come. That's one opinion. Amar Avaye, agrade kalla dohaka. It says that there used to be a concept, which I believe many synagogues do it till today, including ours, to combine all the Torah classes before the holiday, especially Shabbat Shuba, Shabbat Agadol, special occasions throughout the year. So Abaye says, you know what is the sechar? That people are next to each other, tight, in order to listen to the Torah class. We need to remember one thing. In the time of the Mishnah, in the time of the Gemara, even many centuries later, what do you think that people sat when they came to the knis? You think they had 21 inches cushion? Our seats is bigger than an airplane, by the way. I'm not selling seats, but I'm just telling you to follow the airline industry. You have 21 inches, 22 inches. All right? Have this in mind when you need to make a decision. Hamavdil? No, for sure not. I think their seat is what, 16? Oh, you came with that airline? Wow. All right. Baruch Hashem, you made it. That's the main thing. Anyways, so it says the fact, so to speak, that people sit next to each other tight and uncomfortable, so to speak, because it's not like the way we have today in our synagogues throughout the world. That's part of the sechar. Amar Rabba, agrade shamata sevara. The main concept is to understand the lesson. I'm happy to say that I'm okay with all of the above. The fact that a person comes to the class, that's already one zechut. The fact that a person sat in the class, that's another zechut. And if the person is able to walk out of the class with something practical, something new, a lesson for life, that's of course a sechar. So the short answer is all of the above make up this particular zechut of coming to Torah learning. Now, I like to only, because I gotta go to the Beta Haim now, but I like to plant the seed only. I'm gonna plant the seed, and don't tell me, Rabbi, you left me hanging. I'm gonna leave you hanging because we have 6 weeks to talk about Shovavim. And every day there is a tiny message on the topic of Shovavim. So the Zohar, I'm going to give you the introduction of the Zohar Kadosh. You know, somebody asked me, what's the Torah perspectives on the fire of Los Angeles? Devastating. Devastating. Horrible. I don't know. I hope, I don't know if there were casualties. I don't know. Many. Wow. Wow. That's a lot. I'm saying, wow. I thought that people perhaps would have been able to escape. They did not want to. Okay, may their families have consolation. But the devastation is beyond our understanding. As much as you see the video clips, you see the fire roaming and traveling and thousands of homes. I don't know how many people were displaced. Wow. 100, wow, that's a lot. Anyways, to make a long story short, somebody asked me, what's the Torah perspective of this? I told the person, I'm not a prophet. I don't know the answers. You know, why there is a fire there. But we need to remember one thing. Hurricanes, like in South Florida that we have during the summer, I think hurricane season is over, Baruch Hashem. But hurricanes, fires, eruption of volcanoes, hail, or heavy rains that cause flooding and destruction, tsunamis, typhoons, all these ecological reactions connected to the weather, either way you look at it, they're not by default. In other words, you can blame the dry weather or you can blame the forestal fire, which is what they are saying, but there is a pasuk in our daily prayers that says, Esh ubarad sheleg bekitor, ruach se'ara osa devaro. Esh ubarad, fire and hail. Sheleg, snow. Kitor, volcanoes. Ruach se'ara, hurricanes. Osa devaro. They fulfill God's wish. It's an act of God. Like the insurance policy says, an act of God. That's what the insurance policy says, right? They won't pay because they can control God. Thank God they recognize that at least. But that's an excuse they use sometimes. But unfortunately, in this case, we cannot overlook that fact that there is something above and beyond the drought, or the lack of rain. Of course, it's all connected because already the pasuk says in the Torah, especially in Eretz Israel, that one of the ways that God activates judgment is by drought. That's what you say in the Shema. Beharaf Hashem, God will get upset. Be'atzar et hashamayim, and will block the heavens. Ve'lo yeh matar, and it will not rain. Ve'adama lo titen et yevulah, and the land will not provide its produce. So it's a chain reaction. The question is, what causes this reaction from Hashem? is not a simple reaction. You can gauge the reaction by the uh, amount of damage, the effect, intensity. So the Zohar says three things can cause godliness to depart. Yani God says, I'm taking a step back. Yes. Wow, that's a miracle. You know where I saw such a miracle as well? In Eretz Israel. In the year of Shemitah, there was some type of drought. The fields on the left and the fields on the right got hit by the fire. The field in the center was protected. And we have videos, pictures, and eyewitnesses of these miracles. I believe in that miracle. So comes the Zohar Kadosh and it says there are three types of sins that cause godliness to depart from the world. And it causes even to the point that even when people cry out and pray for a heavenly salvation, sometimes it doesn't get the desired results. Three, and with this I'm going to close the book. Three heavy ones. Says the Zohar Kadosh, Haba al Nida. When husband and wife do not follow the laws of family purity, and that brings a spiritual downfall. Number two, Haba al Hagoya, a Jew that becomes intimate with a non-Jewish lady. Three, Ahoreg Obar Bim'e Immo, abortion. What's the common denominator of these three actions? Intimacy. Intimacy. Okay, I know I felt like a drop, like a heavy weight bomb on top of each and every one of us. But this was the desired effect of the opening statement of the time of the Shovavim. The beautiful part of it is that the Shovavim gives us the opportunity to remedy to a certain extent. I will be honest with you. It's much deeper than what I'm saying. But we have 6 weeks of training that can help us somehow accept the Teshuvah process and work on these three topics. Even though you may say, Rabbi, I'm beyond that age, I'm this and that. Once the Torah does the talking in the next few weeks, B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to be able to have a better understanding of why these weeks, why Mehillah, why these three topics, intimacy between husband and wife, and the wife does not go to the mikveh, with a Goya is obviously, and abortion, which regretfully in our days, in our generation, it became very legal and acceptable. Unfortunately, very common and approved even. But B'ezrat Hashem, do not despair. But I needed to say the opening statement, so at least B'ezrat Hashem, when we continue tomorrow, we already know what the topic of Shovavim is all about. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen Be'amen. Rabbi Hanania ben Akashia Omer, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל לפי